The show focused on delivering beneficial information on everything to do with products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Well, welcome back to Talk About Strata on Experts on Call on AM 650. I'm Tony Giventu. I'm your host for the show, and we're talking to Dan Schmidt and Dave Humphreys from Repainting about repainting multifamily buildings and large complexes, and the right time to get it done, what should be done, and we were just finishing off a discussion in the previous segment about when's the right time to get the painting done on the building, but more importantly, how do you prolong the painting? And I think Dave has some ideas on how strata corporations can look at the cycles for the building.
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, maintenance cycle, a set maintenance cycle for your building, and it could vary if it's a large strata complex from building to building, as we mentioned before, talking about whether they're situated on a greenbelt. But if there's something happening every 2 years where some cleaning's going on, some maintenance, it could be balconies and washing of the exterior substrates. This is the time that someone's laying eyes on the building and they're able to help you manage as a strata the conditions of those areas and foresee problems that are coming. They're a lot less expensive to deal with if you have a few targeted repairs than if you've left it for 5 years and there's a gross issue of water ingress or something.
Well, we're in British Columbia, so odds are you are probably on a green belt or something, but you do raise an interesting issue around being on a green belt. What happens if a building is adjacent to a creek or a river or a seaside location or a lake? There must be conditions, environmental conditions. And what kind of conditions do they impose on the project?
It can be restrictive as far as how maintenance goes, depending on where they're situated in proximity to riparian areas. It can also change in the Lower Mainland. There's so many different climates. We do projects in Steveston where they're right out on the salt water, and there's seagulls everywhere. Right. So we have many different things to deal with because of those situations. Mildew, algae that build up in the humid areas that we don't see in the drier areas of the Lower Mainland. So they all affect the conditions of those coatings that are on the exterior of your building.
And they also affect how you're actually going to tackle the project. We had a project, a fairly large one in the Tri-Cities, and the back of it was to a fisheries creek.
Right.
And so suddenly you're needing to think about, okay, we're going to wash this building, we're going to treat this algae and mildew, we're going to use some bleach and those kind of things to prepare the surfaces. What's going to get in the creek?
Right.
What quantity of water, what kind of chemicals are we going to use or not use in order to protect those kind of things? So in these kind of sensitive areas, we not only want to be environmentally friendly, we want to be particularly sensitive to the conditions around them.
So Dan, let's go back to, we're just the Strata Corporation. You've just got a phone call for the first time. You're the first contact. The Strata's called, the property manager's called you, and they want a quote on the building to get it repainted. What are the kind of the key steps that you follow? But where do you see where the Strata corporations kind of miss some of their opportunities in this relationship?
Yeah, and I like your use of the word relationship, because really that would be ideal if early on we can develop a bit of a working understanding between the strata and ourselves. Often it seems a little adversarial. They're expecting that we're out just to charge them a large price and get the most profit we can out of this job, rather than trying to work towards a long-term relationship where we work with them. And they're often pretty confused. Most of the strata councils are volunteers. They don't know a lot about building an envelope. We don't expect them to. That's our job to know those kind of things. So most of the time, what a contractor wants to know is some pretty clear instructions. They want to know clearly what's in and what's out. So are we painting all the trim? When we're painting the trim, are we painting other associated components? Is the stucco being included, or the hardy board, or those kind of things?
Right.
So a very clear scope. The second thing I think they want to know is how likely is this job to happen right away? So am I meeting with you and we're talking about a budget? That's great. I'd love to do that. That gets us in early in the cycle and allows us to have that relationship and maybe get those questions answered before they're urgent. But if it's going to happen this year, then we need to think differently about how we proceed with it as well. And I think color has become a bigger issue nowadays. Um, some of the trendy colors that have come out and some of the darker colors have really changed the environment as far as what lasts and what doesn't last.
Actually, yeah, maybe Tony can comment on that because you probably deal with that in the meetings that you attend.
Well, I was going to say we've both been at meetings where we're dealing with, at the same time, where we're dealing with the issue of color. And color, when buildings are being changed in any kind of significant use or appearance, will require that the Strata Corporation have a higher voting threshold on it. So it's fine to say we're repainting the building, and we've had this great legislative change that occurred a few weeks ago. That now, if the repainting of the building is recommended in the depreciation report, and the Strata has the money in the bank in their reserve funds, it's only a majority vote to approve that contract and approve those funds now. So it's a big change in how Strata Corporation save money, how they spend money. If the Strata Corporation has a depreciation report and they're in a long-term investment and planning cycle for expenses, most of their decisions are by a majority vote, which makes a big difference to Strata corporations. The one thing that isn't different, though, is significantly changing the appearance of the building. I think if a building has a color palette that has a series of colors that work well together, and the Strata Corporation adjusts the location of the palette, so they switch the trim and the railings for issues, or they do things like that, they're not altering significantly, and the Strata Council may have to get some advice from a lawyer on whether this is going to be significant or not. I think if the owners in a complex think it's significant, they'll certainly raise it. It works really well when Stratas are repainting buildings. If there's any kind of color change, have some town hall meetings with your owners, right? Do consult with your owners. Get some consensus from the ownership that they like the choices. But I think the worst thing a Strata can do is when they get to their meeting and they give people two colors to choose from at the meeting and they have to vote on it, which guarantees the vote splits and nobody can make a decision on going ahead, right? I've been to many of those meetings where no one can decide upon a color, and if you put 20 people on a color committee, you're going to have 20 variations of what the building should look like. So how do people pick color? What if they want to rechange the appearance and the color of the building? Is it an easy thing to do? Because there must be some limitations around that as well.
Well, there are some limitations, just in the sense that, well, paint nowadays can be any color you want, but paints don't necessarily last in any color you choose.
Exactly.
And so especially some of the darker accent colors and so on, as good as paints have become, they still do fade much more quickly. And that costs you more in the long run because your maintenance cycle then is shorter. If paint doesn't look very good, your building doesn't look good, you're going to want to paint it more quickly than if you use something else. What we've found that works really well when you're dealing with color is to have an actual subcommittee of the Strata. So get a color committee together. Get 2 or 3 people that are thinking and talking about color. Or if there's no one in that whole Strata Council that wants to deal with color, get one of them and get some outside help. So we will often recommend a designer, a very practical person that's worked with Strata. Make sure she or he knows. I say she because a lot of the designers working in the industry are female, but that whoever's doing it knows Strata, isn't just a house kind of color consultant. Right. Bring them in, and they will be able to help give 2 or 3 or 4 palettes that you can then narrow down as you go to these kind of town hall meetings. And I like that. Either at a town hall meeting with a very large display of what the colors are going to look like, and you can even do that in pictures nowadays. Our digital photography works really well. Or ideally, if you've been working with a contractor in some sort of relationship, get them to paint a mock-up, to actually do a large sample on one of the units or on a couple of the units, and have people walk by. Because when you see it outside and you see the door trim in one color and the stucco in a second color and the fascia in the third, and you see the way they combine out, it really makes sense to people. Not everybody kind of gets it from a picture or from a couple color samples.
So is it a predictable assumption that the darker the paint finish, the more likely or the more rapid the fade change is going to be?
It depends partly on the tints that are involved in making that color, but yes, a general answer would be that any darker color absorbs more sunlight and heat during the day, and obviously gives it off at night. So it thermally cycles a great deal more than a neutral colored or light colored paint, and that's evident if someone's wearing black pants in the sun and white pants in the sun. You're going to feel a difference of the heat. That's exactly what's happening to the substrate that paint is applied to. As that substrate may be less stable, like wood, it will expand and contract as that cycle happens, and that creates microfissures in the paint coating over time. Outside cladding like cementitious panels obviously they're much more stable and tend not to expand and contract as much as wood substrates.
So here's a question, and this is a common statement I hear. Well, we have hardy plank on our building, and it's got a 35-year warranty, so we don't have to do anything with it for 35 years. Is that true?
Unfortunately not. Yeah. I mean, hardy plank is a cementitious board. It's got cement and it's got, wood fibers together built into it, and it's a very stable substrate. It's very close to concrete.
Right.
So it is much more durable from a rot perspective or that kind of thing. But it still needs to be protected, and it still does have fibers in it. Just like any other surface, it would need to be the paint would need to be renewed. And when you look at the paint being renewed, I go back to the manufacturers, and the manufacturers say we make our paints and they will last about 7 or 8 years in typical weathering kind of conditions. So normally that's a good rule of thumb, that 7 to 8 year cycle. If you're thinking how often should I repaint, start there. And it may be a little shorter with some darker colors or some other issues that are going on like we talked about. Yeah.
Well, and one of the conditions, and we are dealing with this with one of the Strata corporations right now, is that when you have a warranted product, there are obligations for maintenance, repair, upgrades, routine surface applications, whatever the warranty conditions require. If you don't meet those warranty conditions and you get to the 15-year period and you start to have some problems with that product, you jeopardize your warranty.
Yeah, you sure do. And those manuals they hand out on major residing projects and whatnot, they drop it on your lap. And there's a lot of wording in there, as you just mentioned. But regular maintenance and cleaning is just so important for these stratas. That's what's going to make that coating last longer.
And Tony, I think we've seen a lot more lately where the stratas have given, either through their strata manager or directly to us, they've sent us part of that report or sent us the document and said, can you help us walk through that? And I think they're getting more information now. We're kind of in an information age explosion in the sense that the depreciation reports, the maintenance manuals, the warranty manuals, those kind of things. A good contractor should be able to find their way through it and be able to say, here's the things that actually it is recommending, and here's how you can actually address them in a reasonable way and do that maintenance cycle we were talking about, where maybe every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, you're addressing some of it. So it's not these kind of hills and valleys of expenses, right, that you're not coming for a cash call. You must have a ton of places where you all of a sudden they're asking for $1,500 and people are going, well, wait a second, why should we be paying so much money for just maintaining our buildings? I didn't think we needed to maintain them at all.
Well, and I think one of the best things from Strata Corporation's perspective are depreciation reports, because even if the Strata Corporation doesn't change its funding patterns, they now have a sense of when those major targeted repairs happen in the future. Strata Corporation can keep their strata fees the same. They can have minimal contributions to the reserves, which means they eventually will have major special levies, but they can make those choices. But now they know that in 2018 from the report, there's a targeted cycle of doing renewals on the building, and one of them is going to be repainting the building. So, the Strata can start planning for that, and the owners can start planning for that financially. And it's interesting, you talked about the information age. We have so many Strata corporations now that are building websites. And on the websites, they will actually have interactive systems for things like maintenance manuals and service manuals. So, for a Strata corporation that's a new building or a building that's been reclad, they have new siding, they have new finishing on their building, just having the ability to have some assistance to get around, get people to help them through understanding what those maintenance manuals are pretty good. If they can find them. That's the big mystery.
Yeah, that's the worst thing that can happen is this book gets delivered, it gets shoved in a corner, and no one looks at it. So
it never got posted to a digital service so that no one ever had the ability to look at it. It's not a secret.
Yep.
The Strata Corporation, all the owners should know about it. Some way of storing information so that the Strata creates a corporate history makes a big difference. And it has to make your job a little bit easier also if you have that original service manual to understand the product that was installed and the life expectancy on the product.
Definitely, and there's actually a lot of products out there now that just aren't compatible. They're proprietary products. Once applied, really can only be reapplied with the same product. So we do need to know that information. We can do an assessment on the building and pick these ones out fairly readily, but it certainly does keep everyone basically informed.
Well, very interesting. I'm Tony Giaventu. This is Experts on Call on AM 650. We'll be back right after this break.
Delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call, and there's more still ahead on AM 650.